In an unexpected twist of events, Judge Amy Coney Barrett publicly mocks Pam Bondi in the courtroom, unleashing a heated exchange that no one saw coming. As the tension rises, Bondi, known for her sharp wit and unyielding confidence, refuses to back down. What happens next is a remarkable turn of events, one that leaves Barrett speechless. Stay tuned as the courtroom drama unfolds, showcasing a stunning comeback that defies all expectations. Make sure to like and subscribe to follow the full story. It all began on a chilly Thursday morning, as the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. The case was high-profile, with Pam Bondi, the former Florida Attorney General, representing a client embroiled in a controversial legal battle. Judge Amy Coney Barrett, known for her stern demeanor and unwavering principles, was presiding over the proceedings. Bondi was no stranger to the courtroom, but this day was different. She had faced challenges before, but today, something felt off. As the defense team laid out their case, Bondi confidently spoke, outlining the legal precedents that supported her argument. But as she went on, she could feel the tension in the air. Judge Barrett's icy gaze never wavered from her, and there was a certain smugness in her posture that Bondi couldn't ignore. Every word she spoke seemed to be met with an almost dismissive flick of the wrist or an exaggerated sigh from the judge. At first, Bondi tried to brush it off, focusing on the task at hand. But as the case went on, Judge Barrett began making pointed remarks, questioning Bondi's interpretation of the law, in a way that bordered on mockery. With each comment, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew tenser. Was Barrett trying to undermine her? Was she challenging Bondi's legal expertise in front of the entire court? "How quaint," Barrett remarked during one exchange, barely concealing a smirk. "That's one way to interpret it, Ms. Bondi. But perhaps you missed a few key details." Bondi's eyes narrowed. It was clear that Barrett was not only questioning her legal arguments, but also her intelligence. The room grew silent as Bondi paused, taking a deep breath. Could this be the moment where things went too far? Could Barrett's arrogance be her undoing? As the judge continued, Bondi's patience began to wear thin. Every part of her wanted to lash out, to retaliate against Barrett's taunts. But she had learned to keep her composure. She had been in this position before, facing off against opponents who underestimated her. But this time, it was different. Barrett's smugness was blatant, and the court had taken notice. Bondi's reputation for biting comebacks was well known, but would she let Barrett's arrogance slide? Or would she deliver a response so sharp that it would leave the judge speechless? Stay tuned as the drama builds. What will Bondi do next? Will she keep her cool, or will this confrontation lead to a courtroom showdown that no one could have predicted? The courtroom was still, the air thick with tension. Judge Barrett's eyes glinted as she watched Bondi, almost daring her to make a move. The smugness was unmistakable now. Barrett was enjoying herself. It was as if she had the upper hand, and no one in the room could question her authority. Bondi, however, was not the type of person to back down from a challenge, and Barrett had just given her the opening she needed. "I would like to remind the court," Bondi began, her voice steady but firm, "that I'm not here to be questioned on my qualifications or ability to interpret the law. I'm here to ensure that justice is served." The words hung in the air for a moment, and the courtroom seemed to hold its breath. It was clear that Bondi was no longer playing the same game. She wasn't going to let Barrett's mocking tone go unchecked. As Bondi spoke, her posture straightened, her eyes locking onto Barrett with unflinching resolve. The judge's face was still a mask of arrogance, but something had shifted. Was it possible that she was beginning to realize the strength in Bondi's resolve? Barrett didn't flinch, not at first. She raised an eyebrow, her lips curling into a sly smile. "Oh, of course," she replied, almost condescendingly. "But let's see if your version of justice is as flawless as you believe it to be." The words stung, but Bondi didn't flinch. The fire in her eyes only grew stronger. How dare Barrett suggest that she wasn't capable of doing her job? How dare she mock her years of experience in the legal field? The room was silent, every eye trained on the two women. The tension between them was palpable, and everyone in the courtroom knew something was about to happen. Would Bondi take the bait and escalate the confrontation, or would she rise above it? It wasn't long before Bondi answered the question for herself. "Justice is not about who can shout the loudest or who holds the most power," she said, her voice rising just enough to grab the attention of everyone present. "It's about truth. And in this case, truth is on our side. The law is on our side." The weight of her words echoed through the courtroom, and Barrett's expression faltered just for a split second. Was she starting to understand that Bondi wasn't just another lawyer she could dismiss, that this woman in front of her had the strength and intelligence to take on anyone, even a powerful Supreme Court judge? Bondi could see the flicker of doubt in Barrett's eyes, and that was all she needed. She wasn't here to back down or be silenced. She was here to fight, and she wasn't going to let anyone, not even a judge with immense power, intimidate her. The tension in the courtroom had shifted. Now it was Barrett who seemed uncomfortable. Bondi had taken control of the room with a simple but powerful statement. What Barrett had tried to mock as weakness had now turned into a powerful declaration of strength. Was this the turning point? Would Barrett continue to mock Bondi, or would she realize the mistake she had made? Next moments would be critical. What would happen when Barrett's arrogance collided with Bondi's unshakable confidence? Barrett's confidence had always been her greatest weapon. But in the face of Bondi's unwavering stance, it seemed to be losing its edge. The courtroom was still buzzing with tension, but there was a shift in the atmosphere. Bondi had taken the moment of ridicule and turned it into an opportunity. Barrett, however, seemed to be grappling with the weight of her own actions. With a small, almost imperceptible nod, Barrett gestured to the defense team, signaling that she was ready to move on. But Bondi wasn't about to let her off that easily. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the courtroom on her now, and the audience, whether in the gallery or watching at home, was invested in every word that would come next. This was more than just a legal battle. This was a confrontation of wills, and Bondi knew that in this moment, she had the upper hand. "Judge Barrett," Bondi began, her voice calm, but carrying the weight of someone who had something important to say. "I will not allow you to mock me or my client. This case is about justice, not about who can belittle the other." Barrett's lips twitched in frustration, and for a fleeting moment it seemed like she might lash out. The self-assuredness that had once defined her presence in the courtroom was beginning to crack, replaced by something else, something far less certain. "You're hardly in a position to lecture me about justice," Barrett shot back, but her tone lacked the venom it had before. There was a hesitation, a crack in her voice that hadn't been there earlier. She was beginning to realize that Bondi was not going to back down. And that realization had the power to unnerve even the most seasoned of judges. But Bondi wasn't about to let her opponent's words distract her. She wasn't just fighting for the case at hand. She was fighting for respect, for the integrity of her profession, and for the right to stand tall in the face of any challenge. Her voice rang out, firm and unyielding. "No one in this courtroom is above reproach," she declared, the weight of her words hitting everyone present. "Not me, not you, not anyone. We are all here to serve the law, and I intend to do that with every ounce of my being. If you doubt that, Judge Barrett, then perhaps it's time for you to reflect on why you're sitting in that seat." The words hit like a hammer, and for a moment even Barrett seemed stunned into silence. The courtroom was still, the air heavy, with expectation. It was clear that Bondi's words had struck a chord. She wasn't just challenging Barrett's authority. She was challenging the very foundation of her self-image. Barrett took a deep breath, her expression hardening once more. She had to recover. She had to regain control of the situation. But Bondi was not about to make it easy for her. The tension between them was palpable, and Bondi could feel the power dynamic shift. She wasn't just a lawyer in a courtroom anymore. She was a force to be reckoned with. Judge Barrett had underestimated her, and now she would have to face the consequences of that mistake. "I'm here to win, Judge," Bondi continued, her voice cold, but full of determination. "And I'm not going to let you stand in the way of that. I will fight for my client, no matter who tries to stand against me." Barrett's lips tightened into a thin line, and for the first time, it was clear that the judge was rattled. The woman who had once seemed untouchable was now questioning her own approach. What had started as a mocking exchange had escalated into something far more significant. Bondi had shown her that even those in positions of immense power could be challenged. And at this very moment, Barrett was beginning to realize that she had underestimated her adversary in a way that she would not soon forget. The courtroom had shifted. The atmosphere had become electric. Bondi wasn't just fighting for the case anymore. She was fighting for something deeper, something that no one in the room could ignore. Was Barrett starting to realize she had made a grave mistake? Would she continue to try to belittle Bondi, or would she finally concede that this confrontation was no longer something she could control? The courtroom was now on edge. Every eye was on Judge Barrett, waiting for her response. The silence was suffocating, almost as if time itself had slowed. Bondi's words had hit their mark, and even the judge, who had once wielded her authority with confidence, was beginning to feel the weight of her actions. Barrett sat back in her chair, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk. Her mind raced as she tried to compose herself. This wasn't supposed to happen. She had expected Bondi to crumble under pressure, to back down and apologize. Instead, Bondi had stood her ground and thrown Barrett's own arrogance back at her. It was a move that the judge had not anticipated, and the realization stung. For a moment, Barrett glanced over at the defense team, seeking solace in their presence, but their faces were unreadable. They knew this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a war of egos. And at this moment, it wasn't clear who was going to emerge victorious. Would it be the seasoned judge, or the determined lawyer who had just turned the tables? "Judge Barrett," Bondi said, her voice steady but assertive, "if you continue to mock me, it will only reflect poorly on you. I've been in this profession long enough to know how to handle myself. I won't be intimidated, and I won't let you undermine my credibility." The words were like daggers, cutting through the tension in the room. Barrett's eyes flickered with irritation, but she couldn't ignore the truth in Bondi's statement. She had gone too far, and now she was the one on the defensive. "What are you suggesting, Ms. Bondi?" Barrett shot back, her tone sharp but betraying a hint of uncertainty. "That I should bow down to your little theatrics?" "I'm suggesting that this courtroom is a place for professionalism and respect, Judge," Bondi replied, her voice unwavering. "You're supposed to be a leader here, not a bully. If you're going to continue with this, I'm afraid I'll have to reconsider how I proceed with my case." It was a subtle but powerful warning. Bondi wasn't just challenging Barrett's actions. She was calling her out, putting her in a position where the judge had to choose: continue with her arrogance, or admit that she had overstepped her bounds. Barrett's face reddened slightly, but she refused to let Bondi see her falter. "You're out of line, Ms. Bondi," Barrett snapped, though there was a tremor in her voice that made it clear she wasn't as certain as she had been earlier. Bondi didn't flinch. She was no longer playing the game on Barrett's terms. She had taken control of the conversation, and now it was clear that the judge was the one scrambling to regain the upper hand. "You can say whatever you like, Judge," Bondi said coolly, "but the facts remain. I'm here to do my job, and I won't let you distract me from that. If you have a problem with how I'm handling this case, then I suggest we take a step back and discuss it in private. But I won't tolerate disrespect in front of the jury and the public." The boldness of her statement rang through the room like a bell. There was no turning back now. Barrett had underestimated her adversary, and Bondi was not about to let her forget it. Barrett's jaw tightened and she inhaled sharply, her mind racing. She knew Bondi was right. She knew the stakes were higher now. A public confrontation was something Barrett could not afford. Her reputation, built over years of serving on the bench, was on the line. One wrong move, one more misstep, and she would lose not only the case but also her credibility in front of the world. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move. Bondi had pushed Barrett into a corner, and now the judge had to make a choice: admit her mistake and back down, or continue the fight and risk losing everything. But in that moment, Barrett knew she could not afford to make another miscalculation. She glanced at the defense table, then back at Bondi. The realization hit her hard. She had no choice but to back down. The audience, the jury, and even her own colleagues were all watching. She couldn't afford to look weak. But at the same time, she knew she had to make a decision that would keep her in control. With a deep sigh, Barrett finally spoke, her voice quieter but still firm. "You've made your point, Ms. Bondi. Let's continue with the case." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement that Bondi had won this round. For the first time since the beginning of the trial, Barrett had ceded the floor. The courtroom was still, but the air felt different. The dynamics had shifted, and now all eyes were on Bondi. She had done it. She had stood up to one of the most powerful figures in the courtroom, and in doing so, had forced her adversary to retreat. The battle wasn't over, but Bondi had taken control of the narrative, and it was a victory that no one would forget. As the words hung in the air, the courtroom shifted into an almost surreal stillness. Bondi could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. She had been through her fair share of courtroom battles, but this was different. This wasn't just about legal strategy or winning a case. It was about respect. And for the first time in a long while, Judge Barrett had been forced to respect her. Bondi's eyes remained fixed on the judge, but there was a quiet satisfaction in her gaze. She had weathered the storm, and now she was in command. The air had a new tension, one where the power dynamics were no longer as they had been at the start. Bondi had made her point, and everyone in the room knew it. She had exposed Barrett's arrogance for what it was, nothing more than an attempt to assert dominance, and she had done it with nothing more than her words. Barrett's gaze, which had once been piercing, now faltered slightly. She cleared her throat, trying to regain her composure. But the damage had been done. Bondi had disrupted her authority, and that was not something Barrett was used to. Not in her courtroom, not in front of an audience. The realization that she had been outmaneuvered by a younger lawyer stung more than she cared to admit. "Fine," Barrett muttered, her voice tight with restraint. "We'll proceed. But let's make sure we keep this professional from here on out." Bondi nodded slowly, her demeanor calm but unwavering. "Of course, Judge. I've always been professional. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless." Bondi didn't need to say more. She had already made her statement. As she turned back to face the jury, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted once again. The tension that had lingered in the air seemed to dissipate, replaced by a quiet sense of anticipation. The power had shifted, and now it was Bondi who commanded the room. As the proceedings continued, it was clear that the once untouchable Judge Barrett was no longer the dominant force she had been moments ago. Her confidence had been shaken, and it was unlikely that she would recover fully during this trial. Bondi had not just won an argument, she had won the respect of everyone in that room. Later, as the trial went into recess, whispers filled the halls. Legal professionals, court staff, and even spectators were talking about the unprecedented exchange. Word had already spread. Pam Bondi had put Judge Amy Coney Barrett in her place. For the first time, the powerful judge had been forced to back down. And no one could stop talking about it. Back in the defense team's room, Bondi allowed herself a brief moment to relax. Her colleagues, who had been watching the drama unfold, nodded at her with admiration. They had seen the way she handled herself, and they knew that this moment would go down in history. Bondi had proven that no matter the opposition, no one was above being held accountable, not even someone as powerful as Judge Barrett. Her phone buzzed, and Bondi glanced down at the screen. It was a message from an old friend, a colleague in the political world, asking how things had gone. She smiled to herself before typing a quick response. "Let's just say, I made my mark today." Outside the courtroom, the world would soon hear about what had happened. The media would pick up on the story. The headlines would flood social media, and the public would be talking about this case for weeks to come. But for Bondi, it wasn't about the fame or the recognition. It was about standing up for herself and for every other person who had ever been underestimated or mocked. As she walked back into the courtroom to continue the case, Bondi knew that this was just the beginning. She had sent a message loud and clear. No one, not even a powerful judge, was going to walk over her without consequence. And as the trial continued, the world watched, waiting to see what Pam Bondi would do next.